What is a clean wine? Is it a marketing ploy? Is it a technical term? To help unravel this mystery, I have with me today on Wine Matters, Sam from Settlers Creek Wines, one of our winemakers there. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Wendy. How you going?
I'm good, honey. How are you?
Good.
So what is all this? I know it's just out there in the market at the moment. I'm hearing everything about clean wines. What is a clean wine?
Yeah, it's a very complicated term. But before we get stuck into that, let's actually get a glass of wine.
Let's do it. We have to. This is a hot topic,
Tradition.
isn't it?
Oh, hot topic.
Oh,
yeah,
this is
that's
a
it.
tradition to drink wine. Yes, we need to have a glass of wine to cover off this.
That's it.
Don't forget our producer friend
Now,
over there.
this is one of our very special wines from Sadler's Creek. It's a Nebbiolo from Young, which is really cool. It's a few and far between variety here in Australia that's gaining some traction. And we're quite proud of it, trying to get all of these interesting new varieties into Sadler's Creek. It only sees very large format oak. It only sees very high quality winemaking, and it sees the best treatment possible. Cheers.
Beautiful. Well, this is going to be interesting because I want to understand a bit more about clean wines, Sam, because there's clean, there's natural, there's organic. So what does clean wine, where's it come from? Why is it all of a sudden a term that's being sprouted around?
Yep, absolutely. It's clean wine is a very complicated product term. Is probably a good way to put it. It doesn't have a legal definition by any means, and its technical definition can be changed depending on who's using it.
So does that mean it can be used for marketing?
Yeah, it is very much a marketing ploy, at least in my eyes. It quite often is used to make a wine seem better than it is. I think the best term for what we could call it right now is a big buzzword out there is greenwashing. Clean wine is a form of greenwashing in the wine industry. It's saying, or it's implying, that this wine is better for your health, that this wine is better for the environment, that it's better for this, that, and that, and that, and that. And there's very rarely anything to back that up. Now, admittedly, sometimes clean wine will be made in an organic style or a natural style or a modern style that does set it aside, but that's not what makes it clean. That is just a winemaking product. We at Sadler's like to consider that we make clean wine, but our version of clean is a technical term in that when we go and we taste the wines and we're blending the wines, they are as good as they could possibly be. When we say clean, we mean that there's no faults in it. There's no bacteria growing in the barrels. There's good hygiene in the winery. You can smell the fruit. You can smell all the characters that aren't masked by something that isn't desirable. And that is our version of clean wine. But what that really is just good wine.
Right.
It's a big difference to the marketing concept of clean wine is good for your health.
It's not something we would ever think to market our wines as a clean wine. It has never come into our psyche to even think to do that. Yet all of a sudden people are saying, hey, do you do clean wines? So it's an interesting thing to explore, really, isn't it? So tell me, what is a natural then? So if I want a natural wine or an organic wine, so clean does not equal natural, clean does not equal organic.
Correct. All of the above is correct. Clean is a term that was coined 10, 15 years ago as the start of something new, something trying to evolve in the wine industry. It didn't quite catch on, quite like wine diamonds, like having tartrates in your glass that was shiny. It's just a fault. Clean wine is just pretending to hide something that it's not. And we really need to focus on the transparency of that. So when we talk about transparency, we need to say that clean wine does not mean natural and it does not mean organic. Those are two very different things. Organic winemaking is the process of winemaking where it's quite holistic. Everything from the vineyard to the winery to the bottle needs to be produced in line with certain organic specifications. Now, again, organic is another buzzword that has a bit more significant meaning to a lot of people, but it is not legally regulated, is the best way to put it. Organic wine is not a legally regulated term. It is run by privatized companies.
Okay.
And so each of those companies, there's multiple different organic certification companies in Australia, and every single one of them can have their own guidelines for what it means.
Okay,
So,
interesting.
much like clean wine, it can be a buzzword that is used to sell more wine.
Right. But yet overseas, I think if it's organic, it means organic. No artificial watering, no.
See, again, that's a very
not artificial.
big misconception. Across the board, around the world, there
the
is
same.
no legal definition
Wow.
for organic.
That's interesting.
There is for other products. You can have organic spinach, you can have this and that and that. But in winemaking, there is no legal definition of organics. It's as simple as that.
So how do we help the consumer out? What should they look for to know that they're having a quality wine with minimal intervention, I suppose, or
Yep.
minimal influences of, I don't know, bacteria or whatever you say,
Okay, yeah,
or the negative stuff.
Mhm.
So what as a consumer should I be looking for?
Yeah, well, I think it's people. The average consumer is very health conscious these days, and we all know that wine isn't necessarily the healthiest thing on the planet for you. So we want to make it healthier, which I get. What you want to look for is back to the topic of transparency. You want transparent winemaking. You want to be able to look up the website and see what goes into the wine. You want to be able to look at the bottle and say, okay, I know what variety this is. I know where it's from. I know how it was made. You want to be able to go into a cellar door and talk to their cellar door staff and ask them the questions, and they can say, this is how it was made. This is why it looks like this. And that is the best way you can get the information onto what you want out of a clean wine. Like I said, no definition of clean wine. So we can't define that as anything in particular other than a company
I
came
think
up
it's
with this term.
Yeah, I think for Sellers Creek Wines, if I had to define what a clean wine to us would mean, it would be we make wine with consciousness.
Yes, I think that's a very good definition for it.
Yeah, and I think we make it with heart and soul, and we make it with good intention to be the best it can be. So we use solar power. We, like you said, have a very clean environment.
We recycle all the water we use. We use barrels for as long as we possibly can before they start to fall apart. We try to keep everything as sterile as possible without affecting the environment in any negative way.
We have strong relationships with our, we look after our vineyard wonderfully, and some of the influence you've had in the last few years, Sam's been magnificent, that we're not going to necessarily talk about today, but we know our growers. We just spent last week with our growers, so we know where the fruit's coming from, and we know that it's quality fruit. We know that it's how it's been looked after. We know where it's been, essentially. And I suppose it's like when we talk about our food now, isn't it? Like we want to know.
We want to know where it comes
from.
We're
not necessarily wanting to go to the big retailers and buy our fruit and veg anymore.
It's like when
we prefer to go to the local.
Coles or McDonald's had their 100% Aussie beef campaign, and the company was called 100% Aussie beef. It wasn't actually Australian beef.
Yeah.
People want to know where things come from. They don't want to be lied to. And that's very important in the modern day, and we take pride in our transparency. We take pride in the fact that we only do what is necessary to the wine. We don't add unnecessary chemicals. We don't add unnecessary additives. We don't add sugar to the wine. It is what it is, and it's as pure as possible. And I think that is probably the best definition of clean wine, is wine that is as close to purity as possible, as close to being able to follow every step back to where it came from. And that's something at Sellers Creek that we're very proud of, is that you can look at a bottle, ask us, and we can tell you each step back to where it
we can tell from grape to glass. We can tell you
Absolutely.
the story and know where it's been.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
And yeah, that's fantastic, Sam. I think that's really helped clarify what clean wines is, and just have more awareness and not necessarily get caught up in the hype or the marketing
and the jargon,
because it really is there is a lot of jargon out there. So yeah, always look at your label. If you have the opportunity to come to a winery,
ask the questions.
Boutique wine,
ask the questions you want to know, because you have a whole team of cellar door staff at a winery that are trained to answer your questions, because they know the wines. They know the wines better than you. Well, half the time they know the wines better than the winemakers because they've drunk them more. They know the answers to these questions. They can point you in the right direction to what you want. If you want a clean wine and they ask, what do you mean? It's tough to try and defend yourself, because quite often people don't know what they mean. But they will still help you. Our cellar door staff will still help you. They'll teach you how it was made. They'll show you what to look for. They will come to you and say, this is the wine that we think you would be looking for stylistically wise. I mean, at Sadler's, we have put a lot of effort into the last couple of years to reducing our environmental footprint and reducing the amount of chemicals that goes into the vineyard, that goes into winemaking. We have reduced our sulfur, have replaced it with more natural products that are naturally occurring. For example, we use a product that we derive from dried yeast cells. Now, yeast goes into the wine, ferments, it dies. We then take that dried yeast cell and then process that a little bit further until we get a glutathione, which is the byproduct of the yeast, which to an extent replaces the need for sulfur, which means we don't have to put as much of that into the wine, which is really, really cool. So all these little things that account to the traceability of the wine and how it is made, and that's what adds up to what people want to perceive as a clean wine.
So from a really taking it way back, if you don't get in front of the cellar door, if we're just going to look at a label, again, I think that transparency word is so important. Look, when you're looking for the label, does the label talk about the region? Does it talk about how the wine was made? These are some of the little cues.
Absolutely.
Like, it has the winemaker signed it. To me, that's important, especially if it's a boutique, because they're putting their name to it. So have a look for those type of things as well, because it's being transparent.
Of course. I mean, as a winemaker, it's something that I am a huge fan of because it is so important to me. Like, if I try a wine and there's something interesting about this wine, or there's something different or something that catches my attention, I want to know what they've done in this wine to get there. And there's a range at Sadler's that tells you everything that's gone into making that wine. But I like to go onto the websites and I try to find out, like, what were the steps. And some people are very transparent. They have every step from A to B on their website in a nice laid out document. They can tell you what the year was like. They can tell you what barrels they went into, all of that, which is really, really interesting to me. Now, that is wine knowledge that's probably a bit more advanced than the average consumer. But the fact that they're willing to have that transparency
is amazing.
Right,
it's a great sign, isn't it? And that, to me, is probably, if you're wanting to look at what's better for you, if going towards small wineries, small boutique wineries, people that are willing to be very transparent about what is in the bottle, how they've processed it, how it's been made. I think that's a winning formula.
You don't want to get people offside, and it is an intimidating topic, especially when you start talking about organic and natural, because there are winemakers around the world that are acclaimed organic and acclaimed natural and acclaimed biodynamic, which is a really cool thing to see, because most people are doing it properly. They are trying their best to significantly reduce the impact, and that's the whole point of those terms, is that they're reducing impact.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you have to pay $10,000 to get the sticker on the back of your bottle. But
yeah, there's always some commercial reality.
Exactly right. There's commercial reality in everything. We do our best at Sadler's to reduce our impact across the board. I mean, that's why we do cover cropping. That's why we prune by hand. That's why we don't get tractors going in and out of the vineyard every single day, because we want to reduce that. And but we don't want to pay $10,000 to get a sticker.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
There's no reason to do that when you can come to a cellar door and ask someone and say, yeah, this is how we do it.
Yeah. And again, that's why I think boutique wineries, small wineries, people with passion, heart and soul, making wines, doing their best with great intention, with great conscious awareness of their environment, their impact. I just think there's a great future for the wine industry with more, young people like both you and Brett. Amazing.
The big thing at the moment is sustainability, and that's a big thing for Wine Australia in general. Sustainability is so important. We have a whole board now based on sustainable winemaking Australia. There's still nothing for organics, but there is sustainable winemaking. Being organic across the board is, what's the word? It's not unconventional. The word is unlikely. It's difficult to happen because it requires so much investment, so people can't do that. Sustainability aims to
it can go two different ways. It's like sustainability in the clothing industry. We have so much waste in clothing.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing. You want to have a industry that's sustainable, not over processed, overdeveloped, over I think that awareness as well of going, well, how much do we really need?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. That's why we don't need a huge vineyard at Sadler's. It's not required, because we can still make a beautiful wine and a good amount of it on a small amount of land, so we don't take up much of the landscape. We don't take up much of the environment. Most of the property at Saddlers is still under natural forest, which is really cool. It helps to keep the birds, keep the animals, keep the bugs happy. Now, mainly we don't like the birds all that much. They come and eat our grapes. But we've fixed that in a non-violent way, which is very good.
Yes.
But sustainability being the basis of returning carbon to the soil, producing things with lower water input, reducing your emissions, all of that sort of stuff is important. And that's, I think, one of those things that people think clean wine means, is that it's good for the environment.
And that, if that is the case, that's probably better than thinking that it's clean for the environment versus thinking that it's a more healthier.
Yeah, absolutely. I would prefer people to think it's clean for the environment, not healthy.
Than healthier for
Wine's not healthy.
Yeah, wine's got alcohol in it. We can't
exactly
hide it.
Right.
But
it's as simple as that.
And it's about drinking it in moderation, enjoying it. It's like eating, I don't know, a carbonara or a,
exactly
you don't
right.
need it. It's not necessarily
carbonara. My carbonara has that much cheese in it, and if it didn't, I wouldn't bother eating it. Just like my wine, it's good, right. So I wouldn't bother drinking it if it wasn't.
Everything's about moderation and enjoying it, and then when you're having a premium wine, you're not overindulging. You're enjoying a beautiful glass, often with a loved one.
Yeah,
you're sitting down and enjoying great company and great wine, and that's what's important.
There is every country has their own set of rules into how they can produce a wine. In the States, quite a large portion of wines do have added sugar, because sugar is addictive. Sugar is one of the most addictive substances on the planet. If you want someone to buy something, you put sugar in it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, they've got sugar in everything, so why would they not put sugar in that?
Exactly right. They've got sugar in their bread.
But that's the reality of the
diet
in America.
And like I said, I haven't tried Cameron Diaz's wines, and she may be heralding it as clean, but I have looked at the website for it, and she says clean, and there is nothing on that website that describes what that means. And that is where this transparency comes in, right? Yeah. You can say clean as much as you want. I don't care if you say clean, so long as you tell me why. I want to know why it's clean. Yes. What have you done that's made this different to everything else?
What's your perspective on clean wine?
Your clean? If your clean wine is just...
What are you promoting here?
Exactly. If it's just your wine tastes good, it's just good wine.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily clean wine. If you're just saying it because there's no legal repercussion for saying it, that's not on. That frustrates me to no end. But if you're saying it because you go out of your way to make the best wine by having the lowest impact as possible while still producing a great product, that's great. I'm happy for that. It's not quite clean wine, but I'm happier than just using it as a marketing.
Give us the bullet points underneath it. Exactly. Clean wine because blank, blah, blah.
If you're going to say clean wine, you need transparency. It's as simple as that. This is something that people might have heard, especially if you're listening to a wine podcast, and you're probably interested enough to have heard this before. But there is more sulfur, more additives just in general in a single dried apricot than there is in a bottle of wine. That's not a question, that's a fact. It's as simple as that, right? So the additives that are in a wine are so negligible, it's not funny. When we add things to wine, we do it, to make it microbially stable. So you're not going to get bad bugs or disease growing in the wine. That is the step one, to make it safe and make it healthy for consumption. Same as pasteurizing milk, making it safe and healthy for consumption. Step two is we put additives in the wine to improve the flavor. Once we've made it safe, we want people to enjoy it. Now, these additives are all naturally occurring. Tartaric acid occurs naturally in the grape. Sometimes, if you have a really hot year, it's not going to produce enough of it. And so you just need to give it a little bump, put a little bit more of that naturally occurring acid into the wine just to improve how sharp it is, improve the brightness of the wine, improve the flavor. And third of all, we add in such minute amounts. Such minute amounts. We work in parts per million, right?
I remember once Brett telling me, when he has to write on the label, egg whites have been added, or dairy product has been, whatever you have to, the terminology. And he was showing me the tank, and he goes, and we put in
that much.
Like I'm showing, if you're listening, like we're talking about a couple of mils, like nothing.
Yeah, we add mils per liter. We don't add liters, we add a mil per liter. If we have to add copper, it's probably the scariest thing that goes into a wine, because It's just it's a metal. People say, why are you putting copper into something? It's as simple as that. But when we add copper, we are adding it closer to parts per billion than parts per million, which we only do that to improve the palate. So when wine sits in a barrel for too long, or if wine sits in a tank for too long, or if something goes wrong during the ferment, produces sulfide. Now, if anyone's been to Rotorua or Yosemite or wherever, and you go to big sulfur geysers, you know that smell of sulfur, that rotten air gas. Wines can produce that naturally, right? Copper reduces that. It binds up, sediments out, we take the wine away, and the copper just doesn't get worried about. And that's the only reason it gets added. But again, in such a minute amount, because you're binding up molecules, you're binding up the smallest molecules possible to try and keep it away. And thresholds for certain compounds are higher in some people than others. So Wendy, because I work in wine, I might be much more sensitive to sulfur than you would be. Okay, so I'll walk into the winery and smell something and think, probably needs some copper, and I'll put in 0.001 gram per liter. That's nothing. That's like 5 grains. There's nothing to it. And that's 5 grains that's going into 10,000 liters. It's inconsequential. There's more copper in broccoli if you haven't washed the pesticides off it.
Yes, yeah.
Right? It's not a worry. Additives in wine are not bad, but they can be. That's the thing, right? If you're doing it right and you've done it right, there is no harm possible. There are legal thresholds to what you're allowed to put in, and that's the half-life. That's like the legal threshold is half of what you could put in before you could actually do any damage to someone. And 99% of winemakers don't come close. Winemakers are making things to be enjoyed, and they make them for themselves to enjoy. We want ourselves to be safe just as much as we want everyone else to be.
Yeah.
When I say chemicals in apricots, that's the one I'm talking about. There is more sulfur in an apricot than there is in a bottle of wine. People quite often talk about getting headaches from sulfates, sulfites, sulfurs, whatever. Then in the same sentence, people tell me that they're using wine droppers to get rid of the sulfates in their wine, and they assume that does a better job.
I think it becomes
wine droplets that you put into wine is hydrogen peroxide. That's what it is. It's not fancy magic liquid that gets rid of sulfur. It's hydrogen peroxide. It's a cleaning product to get rid of a chemical. If you're using a chemical to get rid of another chemical, you're making something worse. And that takes us back to our word transparency. Is having that transparency allows people to be educated. Whether they want to educate themselves or they want someone else to educate them, it allows for education. It allows very clear-cut education of what has happened.
Sam, thank you so much, honey.
That's all right.
It's been amazing. Listen, before we roll up or finish up for today, there's one question I always ask everybody that comes on. Why does wine matter to you?
I have an answer to that. That is an answer. It's a question I've been asked a lot. And as a young winemaker, people often ask, Sam, why did you get into wine? Why is this your passion? And I have a very clear-cut answer. Because for me, winemaking is essentially the production of a time capsule. Every single wine that you make holds the components of the year that made it, which is very cool. You can taste the wine and you can say, wow, it was a hot year. Exactly.
Moment in history.
Every process that the winemaker went through. Taste of the wine. You can see if it was a cold year or a hot year. You can see if it struggled to get into barrel. You can see if it struggled to go through ferment. You can see if it was healthy. You can see if the winemaker had too many beers during ferment and forgot about it. All those sort of things add up, and you can taste it in every single bottle.
So if I'm an anthropologist and I'm coming back, I just need to go to a cellar instead of the ground.
You just about could in some cases. I mean, unfortunately, wine doesn't stay as long.
I love that.
Rocks,
That's very interesting. It's really
not
nice.
Quite the ice cores in the Antarctic that tell us how warm it was, but it's a good start if you're only looking to go 20 or 30 years back.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good on you, love. Thank you so much. Cheers, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on to Wine Matters.
Cheers, Wendy.